Hi SPU 30, it's me, Peter Hedman, and I'm here to address this question. What is a stromatolite, and why are stromatolites so rare today? So, a stromatolite is a thing we find in a rock. So if you're out in the field looking at rocks, you might see these wavy, wibbly-wobbly structures in rocks. Most sedimentary layers are rather flat, but these layers exist in curves. And the question is, how could that have formed? If we imagine sediments falling to the bottom of the ocean, for example, here is the ocean, and in the water column are various particles of sediment, and these filter down and create layers on the ocean floor, and this builds up sedimentary rock. But these layers tend to be flat-lying. What could cause layers to be curved, like we see over here? And the answer that we are pretty confident about is that these sedimentary structures are mediated by the existence of bacteria. So bacteria, such as the green photosynthetic cyanobacteria, tend to live in large groups. And these groups are bound together by extracellular proteins in something called a biofilm. So each of these cells secretes various molecules that help create a tough, resistant film, and this is beneficial to the whole group. So if you imagine these bacteria growing on the ocean floor, the biofilm that they create can actually help trap and bind sediment particles and help in the creation of this structure that we call a stromatolite. The stromatolite isn't a fossil of any particular bacteria, but it's created by the action of these ancient bacteria. So if we imagine these bacteria are living at the bottom of the ocean, and sediment particles are once again filtering down, falling through the water, and accumulating in layers at the bottom, we can imagine that these particles become embedded within the biofilm created by these creatures. The existence of these sticky extracellular proteins can help form layers, which are curved. And so each layer in a stromatolite represents where this biofilm might have been living at any particular time. So over time, we might build up a rock that looks like this, where each layer represents the growth of the biofilm at any one time. We can also see what this might look like using analogs of today's organisms. For example, during lecture you saw this picture. And here we see cyanobacteria growing on top of sediment. This picture is from Tanya Bozak's lab at MIT. And you can see here how these different organisms are growing on top of sediment. And so if you waited long enough, the biofilm secreted by these cyanobacteria might help trap and bind these sediment particles together in the kind of layers that we see in the rock record. Here we see another image from Tanya Bozak's lab. So this shows films of cyanobacteria, but also an oxygen bubble that's being produced by the photosynthesis of these organisms. So here's an oxygen bubble. And this is particularly interesting because in the rock record, we sometimes also see what we think are bubbles of gas. In fact, everyone was so excited about this picture that it was the cover of the magazine Geobiology. Why don't stromatolites form today? This is a picture that you have likely seen before. It depicts Shark Bay, Australia, and in it you can see a number of stromatolites. The stromatolites that are sticking out of the water here, these are dead, in the sense that they no longer have living films of cyanobacteria on them who are helping build up these sedimentary structures. So if you were to slice these things in half, you would see various layers like this, just like the stromatolites that we find in the rock record. There's stromatolites that still have living bacteria on them. They're offshore, underwater over here. But the question is, why is Shark Bay, Australia so special? And why don't stromatolites form everywhere? For much of Earth history, for billions and billions of years, stromatolites were everywhere. But not today. And the reason why is that we have other creatures living today. Stromatolites require a very quiet and quiescent environment to form. So if you think of the ocean floor, and if you think of some bacteria living on perhaps a hard surface of a rock on the ocean floor, the growth of these biofilms and their ability to trap and bind particles, this is a very slow process, and it depends on sediment slowly filtering down. If we have other things in the ocean, such as fish or trilobites, that's a trilobite, or worms or eels or sharks or whatever, it churns up the sediment. This is known as bioturbation because the sediment is being stirred or made turbid by biology. So because we have bioturbation today, stromatolites don't form in most places. Did I spell that correctly? I have no idea. Bioturbation.